Let's start with the regions. Our first region that we're going to talk about for North Africa, Southwest Asia, we'll begin with that today. And as you can see, we have a map of Africa up. So we're going to start with North Africa in the Maghreb region. So as always, we first like to define the region by what are the contents. So this region is bordering the Mediterranean Sea and also the Red Sea. Those are the water bodies and the Atlantic Ocean. To the north, we have Morocco, Algeria, Libya, Egypt, Western Sahara, Mauritania, Mali, Niger, Chad, and North Sudan. The Sahara Desert is here, and the Maghreb Mountains lie here. This region is bounded to the south by the transition zone, which we spoke of a little bit before. The predominant religious influence in this part of North Africa, again, as in the region, is Islam. And the transition zone is pushing southward, and the southern part of Africa is predominantly tribal religions and Christian influence. So we'll talk more about the transition zone in a bit, but right now, let's go ahead and talk about the things in this region that make it a region. So first we have the Mediterranean influence. That's the most obvious one. This influence, there is another region that does have some Mediterranean influence too. That would be the Middle East. But I like to say that this region has the most because it has the longest area of southern Mediterranean coastline. So it does have a huge influence in this region of North Africa, but there's also the desert influence. And there's the mountain influence, the Tell area, which is a beautiful, beautiful area that is on the flanks of the gorgeous Atlas Mountains. There's a lot of amazing, you can see there's some green. Wherever there's green in the map, there's water, and it's good for agriculture. So that Tell area and the Mediterranean too is home to the growing of beautiful produce, dates, some of the best olive oil, maybe the best, am I stretching it to say the best olive oil in the world? I don't know, I think so, because always the best olive oil seems to come from this area. Dates, beautiful big medjool dates come from here. Also, there's the famous blood oranges from Morocco, which are a shocking blood red color. Just palm oil, just lots of things that come from here. Spices, really a great area for food. Just wonderful cuisine, wonderful culture. And again, this is the North African culture, which is chiefly Muslim in influence and Sunni for the most part, Arabic speaking, chiefly coming from the nomadic tribes, the Bedouin tribes, also what is known as the blue men with wearing the indigo garb. So this area is known for its Mediterranean influence, it's known for its Saharan influence, and it's known for the transitional zone. So that's what this region is mostly known for. So let's go ahead and, well, it's also broken really into two parts. So really we could say in North Africa there are two regions. The first of which is Egypt and Northern Sudan. And the second of which would be the remainder, which would be known as Maghreb and its neighbors. So we will break it into those two parts. And let's just start with Egypt. Again, the wonderful, fascinating history that we have of Egypt and the Egyptian civilization. This is a hydraulic civilization where we have the Nile. The Nile, again, it flows south to north, always, as we've spoken of before, if you look at a map and want to tell which way a river is flowing, then you look at where all the tentacles are, and then you watch where it is heading. There's always a mouth that most often will branch out when it hits the mouth of a large river body, and it starts high and goes low. So where you see that delta will be where it has flowed to. It always flows to a large water body like the sea, and it flows from a high area. So here it's Ethiopia, where these mountains and high areas here. Uganda in here is where the beginning of the high areas where the water is collected and a lot of rain falls, and then the rain flows this way. It flows north. So it's a little counterintuitive. We expect rivers to flow south for some reason, but they flow north here. And there are different Niles. There's a white Nile, there's a blue Nile, and they join together and head north. And of course it gets fatter and collects more and more water, a lot more water volume. And this river historically, that's what created this ancient civilization. That's the hydraulic theory, where this 5,000-year-old civilization existed because of this fascinating, wonderful bounty of this river. And the river overflowed its banks perennially, and there were fellahin farmers. These people lived in mud huts, and they fished and they farmed. And this way of life, it's ancient and it still exists today. But there's been some changes in the river. Along with all the population in Cairo, Alexandria, these people needed electricity, and also there was a need for some control of the flooding for other reasons that make civilization possible, sedentary civilization and development possible. So dams were put in, especially at Aswan here, this large dam. Then you have Lake Nasser. What happens is the water backs up, fish can't pass, and often the babies get chopped up. So there's also stagnation because there's a lack of oxygen and behind the dam, and where the water gets still, it almost kills the river, where for some reason it's great because there's electricity. It's good for large populations of people that need this, but the farmers that had lived there all along the Nile, expecting the fish harvest and also the flooding that would happen, now there no longer is the flooding of the banks. It's controlled. It's just one big fat sedentary lake that's overflowed its previous banks. And so now there can be contaminants, there can be fish die-offs, there's a lot of environmental issues, erosion. Well, in some ways the erosion could be said to be assisted because it's not flooding anymore, but that was the natural state of things. It wasn't good for setting up civilization though. The fellahin farmers knew how to live on that kind of a perennial flooding system, but it wasn't good for large populations of people. So the dam was put in and these changes made, and so now the fellahin's ancient way of life is really threatened. They're very poor. So there are these issues. Also, Egypt is a very, very young country, meaning that most people are under 25 years old. I believe it's roughly a quarter of the population or more. And the Arab Spring that began in 2011, Egypt quickly went on board because of the number of young people that want to reform the Muslim way of life, modernize things. And so there has been upsets in Cairo and upsets in the government where the leader was ousted and Mubarak was asked to leave. And there's just been a lot of change in Egypt.